Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, and joining me as always is my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Hello.
It is Season 4, Episode 44, and boy oh boy do we have a lot to get to today, Austin. We got Thursday Night Football to talk about, of course. There's a lot going on around the NFL as we wrap up Week 11 and turn our attention to Week 12. And, of course, there's other things to talk about, but, the one thing everyone has been talking about, it's been a national headliner. It was talked about on Good Morning America. It is, of course, the way Thursday Night Football ended between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns, which involved a scrum between several Steelers and Browns, but at the forefront of it was quarterback Mason Rudolph and defensive lineman Myles Garrett for the Browns, and as we all know by now, a mix-up between them ended up with Garrett removing Rudolph's helmet and then later hitting him with his own helmet. Very dangerous and I'll just call it barbaric scene at the end there, and it really marred what was not a very good game, but man oh man, sparks flying. I didn't watch it live, but I've never seen anything like that before.
It was a sight and spectacle to see. I mean, all of a sudden you just see a big scrum breaking out. You see Marquise Pouncey running over after seeing Mason Rudolph get hit. It was just kind of crazy to watch live action. A lot of people said they'd never seen anything like it on the football field, and it really is true. I mean, like, the last time you might have seen it was with, like, Richie Incognito. I think a Raiders player hit Richie Incognito in the head with his own helmet, but, like, other than that, it's just, like, it's never before seen. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen incidents, malicious incidents, like when Albert Hainsworth stomped on the head of an offensive lineman back like 10, 11 years ago. We've seen incidents where helmets have been used, but there's a couple times where the helmet has been thrown at a player, not necessarily swung down like you're chopping an axe down on somebody. That was, where do you want to start here? Because there's just the insanity of Garrett doing that. There's the people that are maybe, I don't know if defending him is the right word, but maybe shifting the blame to Mason Rudolph. Personally, say what you want about my blinders. I don't care what you do. That doesn't, nothing Mason Rudolph did, in my opinion, should have resulted in him being hit in the head with his own helmet. I don't know if for anyone that's never held a football helmet before, it's pretty heavy. I think the average is something like 6 pounds, which is...
It's 6 pounds, and it's heavier than your average red brick, which is 5 pounds.
That's actually exactly what I was going to say. I was pretty sure it's heavier than the average brick. So anyone that's ever held one, you know it's something that would hurt if you were hit with it. I mean, we're talking about, it's a little different when you've got players running into each other, but we talk about the safety of players getting hit in the head when they're wearing the helmet. So when you're not wearing the helmet, that's an even bigger concern. And then you've got a player who is using it as a weapon. And there's a video, I saw it on Instagram, where a man swings the helmet down, kind of like Garrett did, on a wooden chair, and it splits the chair in half. So yeah, say whatever you want to say about Mason Rudolph. It's just, it's hard for me to take it seriously if you're shifting the blame on him. When you're talking about a man who took off Mason Rudolph's helmet, used it as a weapon, and if it was a clean hit on Rudolph, it very easily could have knocked him out, and if it hit him in the right spot, it could have killed him. And we'd be having a very different conversation today.
100%. This could have been criminally charged. Mason Rudolph didn't go about doing that, and I think that's the right decision to not go for the criminal, trying to get him acquitted for this, but it really could have been different. I mean, if Mason Rudolph actually suffered a concussion, or even worse, was killed, we would be having a complete other conversation. I mean, we wouldn't have stopped talking about this. This would have been going on forever, and then this probably would have I don't even know what that would have cost if you actually kill someone on the football field. Myles Garrett would have been arrested. You just did murder, but it's luckily it didn't get that far. Luckily the helmet just bent, like it went the right way that it didn't actually hurt Rudolph all too much. I mean, who knows? Maybe he has a slight concussion from that, and he was just in the moment because he was pissed off. Like, he had a lot of adrenaline going through him. So I wouldn't be surprised if like early on in the week they're like, yeah, he has a concussion now. Like I wouldn't be surprised. But regardless, it was a crazy scene, and I mean, I disagree with the people that said Mason Rudolph started it. I think with 14 seconds left in the game, the ball is out of Mason Rudolph's hands, and you're driving him to the ground, swinging him down. That's what starts it. I don't understand he grabbed it at Myles Garrett's helmet. That started it. Yeah, he grabbed it as the back of his helmet, wasn't trying to rip it off. Just he had his hands on it, and he just pulled. That's not what started. He was pissed off because he got driven to the ground. And my favorite were there were like takes like that on Twitter, because I was obviously very active on Twitter after that on the account, and then some guy was defending it. I'm like, Mason Rudolph was pissed off. Like that's why he even touched his helmet in the first place. He's like, yeah, but I didn't know being pissed off gives you the right to touch someone. I just looked. I didn't answer. I was like, he got hit in the head with a helmet because Myles Garrett was pissed off. Like, what are you on about? There are some really, really dumb people on Twitter. I try not to respond to the ones that were extremely dumb, but like, Jesus. But like I said, I 100% don't believe Mason Rudolph started. Was he an agitator in it? Sure. Yeah, I'm sure he pissed off Myles Garrett, but he didn't start it. Myles Garrett started by driving him to the ground late. That like it's not supposed to happen. Like I don't know. It's 14 seconds left in the game too. Like maybe you know what's even crazier? I think that if Myles Garrett just walloped him, if Myles Garrett just came in and just hit him, I wouldn't be having this conversation. I'd be like, yeah, Mason Rudolph did start it, but it's the fact that he grabbed him. Mason Rudolph had already gotten rid of the ball and then swung him down. It's just it wasn't a one motion thing. It wasn't Myles Garrett just coming in, crashing in, and hitting him. It was Myles Garrett coming in while he gets rid of the ball and then swing him down like 2 seconds later. I don't know, man.
And
I don't understand the people arguing that Mason Rudolph's to blame for the start of that.
And can I also like interject something here? The whole argument of who started it, like it's one thing to talk about who started it when you've got like a regular scrum. You have Myles Garrett escalated it to a level that it obviously should never have gotten there. But when we're talking about whether or not Mason Rudolph started it as if he deserved to be hit in the head with his own helmet, I mean, and we're talking about who started it when it's quite clear that Garrett is in the wrong here, that's some preschool shit. And I don't really care like what you have, like if that's what you're saying, if you're talking, oh, well, the quarterback started it, blah, 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 that's preschool shit. And I don't want to hear it. That's really nonsense. I don't really... that just when I hear people saying that really bothers me. And if you really do want to get into it, the situation, 14 seconds left, Garrett hit Rudolph as he was throwing the ball, that's fine. But, dragging him to the ground, there's no need to do that in that situation. And yeah, Rudolph's going to be upset about that. And, one thing leads to another. And if Garrett had, we'd be talking about it if Garrett removed his helmet. But if it had died after that, and he didn't swing the helmet down, what would we be talking about? We'd just be talking about a scrum at the end of the game, and, the rivalry is alive again, I really think that if Garrett doesn't swing that helmet down, we might not have anything besides maybe a fine on Garrett. I really don't think that we'd have anything resulting from this. It's him bringing the metaphorical hammer down on Rudolph's head. That really is the focus, and I'm just shocked that there are other angles to this. There really should not be any other angles to this. That's all there is to it.
Honestly, it's just at the end of the day, Myles Garrett swung the helmet down. It doesn't matter what got him there. Mason Rudolph didn't do anything like that. Mason Rudolph didn't swing a helmet at him. It's Myles Garrett swung a helmet at a player without his helmet on and hit him in the head. That's it. That's all. It's like it's beyond football at that point because that's not football. That's not a normal scrum. And like what was happening before that, yeah, it would have been a normal scrum. And like you said, it might have just been a fine for Myles Garrett for maybe like a late hit. But it escalated past that.
And he was obviously the main aggressor there. And I think that you need look no further than what his teammates and what head coach Freddie Kitchens were saying in response to that. You know, they were all saying there's no place in the game for what he did. He took it too far. You know, that's not okay. And when you have your own teammates who are typically, you know, they back you up all the time for, you know, stuff that you may or may not have or shouldn't have done, I think that's a pretty telling sign. And I also don't want to, you know, moving past the whole Garrett thing himself, I'm not going to sit here and say that, like you said, that Rudolph is like 100%, you know, not an instigator, like he was just a bystander. Yeah, you know, him and Larry Ogunjobi, Marquise Pouncey, whatever, they all played their part. And, you know, if you want to take a step down, obviously we're talking Garrett, you know, the main issue here. But I just think about what Mason Rudolph did in terms of after he got his helmet ripped off. Just a word of advice to anyone, you know, that's playing football. If you get your helmet ripped off, don't go after the man holding your helmet. I mean, if you don't know it by now, you should. That helmet will protect you. Not having that while someone else has it is stupid. So I understand you're in the heat of the moment there, and he was pissed off, but, you know, just a word of advice. Going up to that man who is quite clearly upset, and I know you're upset too, that's a bad idea.
Yeah, no. Especially while he's still wearing his helmet. There's nothing you're going to do that he can't do worse, especially when he's way bigger than you.
Yeah. So, I mean, all in all, just a really ugly situation. I'm not... like, both sides, you know, the players could have handled it better, but, like, I'm not going to say Mason Rudolph was, you know, just an innocent bystander, but at the same time, it's Myles Garrett. It's 100% on him, and he got a season-long suspension for it, the remaining 6 games of the season. That could spill into next year. I thought that was a very appropriate punishment, and I want to give props to the NFL for coming down with swift action. It took less than 24 hours for them to come out with that season-long suspension for Garrett, and I think that they got it right, at least in terms of the Garrett thing. And we can talk more about, you know, Pouncey and Ogunjobi and Rudolph and everything else. But first, I just wanted to mention the whole Garrett fines and suspensions. I thought they got that part right for sure.
And they're still working on handing out fines. I said everyone that entered the field is going to be hit with a fine, and that's a lot of players on both sides. So they're still working on it. And I do think that Myles Garrett's suspension was a good one. I was thinking 4 to 6, and it's now like 6 to possibly more. I mean, he is appealing it on Thursday, but I don't think it's going to be reduced. It's going to be hard pressed for him to get that reduced at all. It's not that he has a history, but this year it's just not been good for him. He punched Delaney Walker in their first game. In the second game, this one I don't really blame him for, but people were pointing it out. He was the one that hurt Trevor Siemian on a late hit in that Week 2 game against the Jets. And then now this. So it's going to be hard-pressed for him to get it reduced because he can't even argue that he doesn't have a history and this is the first time. People are going to just bring up those past few from this year. So it's going to be tough for him to get it shortened, and he shouldn't have it shortened.
And furthermore, he's been the most, one of the most penalized players in the league when it comes to late hits and stuff like that. So he might not have had a reputation before this year, but this is something that's going to follow him around for the rest of his career and probably the rest of his life. So, I mean, you know, it's just one of those things. You got to be able to control your emotions. It's tough, but, you know, you just can't do that. That's just, you know, sometimes in life, not everything is so black and white, but in this instance, it's, you know, it's about as black and white as you can get. You can't hit someone in the head with the helmet. You just can't. And that's really all there is to it. What else? So the suspension includes the remaining 6 games of the season, any postseason games if the Browns end up getting there, and it could spill into next year as well. Marquise Pouncey got 3 games. One last thing about the whole Myles Garrett if the suspension gets reduced. I don't think it will be, because even though the NFL Players Union is defending Myles Garrett, as they should, that's the point of a union, you have to remember at the same time that he essentially assaulted another player of the union, you know? Like, he assaulted another member of the union, and if, player safety is a big deal to the union, it's pretty tough for them to defend Myles Garrett in that situation. So I have a feeling the suspension will be upheld. I'd be shocked if it is reduced at all.
Yeah, it's not likely.
So then let's go to Maurkice Pouncey, because he had the second longest suspension. He got 3 games. I thought it was a little long, but I do understand it. So basically what happened with Maurkice Pouncey, if you don't remember what happened, as soon as Garrett swung the helmet down on Rudolph, Pouncey was kind of, moving towards that area, and as soon as he saw that happen, it's like, he snapped, because he just saw his quarterback get assaulted by someone else, so he went into like full-on protection mode. He went down there with DeCastro, they threw him to the ground, and then he started punching and kicking him, which again, just another, something I wanted to point out, punching and kicking someone in the helmet with the helmet on is not a good idea, because you'll break your hand, but Pouncey wasn't exactly thinking straight, and I don't think many people would be, because I think most of us would probably do something like that in that situation as well.
Yeah, I don't regret what Maurkice Pouncey did at all. As soon as he started, I was like, you're going to get a suspension, my man, but I respected it. Honestly, I didn't think the suspension was long. I thought it was short. I was expecting 4. Because, at the end of the day, he kicked him in the head and punched him in the head. The kick is what really is driving the suspension. The punches actually aren't that bad. I think the punch usually only gets like one game, but the kick is what really sends him over. But I was surprised to only see 3 games. I was expecting 4.
That's interesting. But, I was just thinking too, because they wouldn't want him in the next Browns game. That's kind of what I was thinking. I still think it could get reduced via appeal.
The appeal is happening today on November 19th, so we'll see. There's an argument that his foot never connected with his head, and that's part of it. And I don't know how intent works in.
I think that's kind of trivial, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I just saw that argument that it didn't connect, and then you're arguing for intent. He meant to kick him. I don't know. I don't really know how that works with the NFL. We'll see. I don't think Pouncey is going to be shortened. I think 3 games. Maybe we'll see. It's never getting down to 1. At the least, it is getting down to 2, so he doesn't miss. So he misses that Browns game for sure. But it's just I think it's going to be upheld at 3 as well there.
And that leaves the last party member to be suspended, being defensive lineman Larry Ogunjobi of the Cleveland Browns. He, for those who don't remember, he actually hit Rudolph from the back and knocked him over after Garrett had already swung his helmet down on him. So he kind of hit him from behind when Rudolph wasn't looking. And there are some people calling him out, still saying that what he did was actually more cowardly, and he only got 1 game. That's why I thought Pouncey would only get 2, was because I thought what Ogunjobi did was probably bad enough to warrant two games, because I thought they would have him out of the upcoming Steelers-Browns game as well. But he's only going to get 1, and just another stupid act by Ogunjobi there, just something that was completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I wasn't even as mad in the moment. I was mad after his press conference where he just straight up lied. He's like, I came in there to protect my teammate. Like, no, you went straight for Mason Rudolph, who was outside the play. Like, now, at that point, I was like, yeah, now you deserve a suspension, because now you're just straight up lying, when it's on camera what you did. Like, I don't know. I thought he was only going to get a fine at first, but I was just annoyed. I was annoyed that he's like, yeah, I was coming to defend my teammate. Like, no, you weren't. Shut up. Just shut up. Like, it's really annoying to me.
So, an overall very ugly situation, but obviously, as bad as it was, it could have been a lot worse, and, be thankful, obviously, first and foremost for Mason Rudolph, that he is okay, and that, he didn't get knocked out or die from that. And, this is kind of crazy, but I'm also going to say, that's lucky for Myles Garrett, too, because, say I don't know him, that well, but from every indication, besides, everything that's happened this year, he has not been someone prone to doing something like that. So you could have his entire life ruined because he snapped and made a critical mistake. I'm not saying that like he wouldn't deserve to, face punishment if he did something like that, but it's just another instance of you need to be in control of your emotions, because what if he had connected and he would, obviously he'd be in jail and he'd regret it for the rest of his life. I mean, it could have been so much worse, and it's still terrible, but it just could have been so much worse. And, as bad as it is, I'm obviously very thankful that it didn't end up being worse.
Oh yeah, definitely a good thing that at least it wasn't as bad as it could have been.
The both sides are kind of playing it off from a certain respect and not trying to hype up the next matchup. But man, oh man, you talk about the Steelers-Browns rivalry, and this incident, I don't know if it'll springboard it into a vicious rivalry, kind of like what we saw with the Bengals and Steelers over the past half decade plus. But I think that we could see now. I mean, it's got to be the most memorable moment between these two teams, right up there with Ed Turkey Jones body slamming quarterback Terry Bradshaw on his head back in 1976. I mean, this is right up there. This has got to be one of the most memorable moments between any two teams in NFL history. And for it to happen on the NFL's 100th season again is why I think the NFL came down so quickly.
Yeah, I made national news, obviously, so I think that's part of the reason why, too. It was spreading outside the football world, and I think it made even the beginning of SNL. I think it was like the opening skit on SNL. They messed around with that, so I think NFL wanted to make it look good that they were actually against that and stuff, but yeah.
So, we'll obviously have these teams will get reacquainted minus a few pieces in a couple weeks. But for now, there are other matters to attend to, including the fact that there was a game played on Thursday night. And again, even when the Browns win, they somehow managed to lose. I mean, Baker Mayfield was talking about how even though they won, it almost felt like they lost. And the Browns they played well enough to win. They earned a 21-7 victory before all that at the end of the game. And it was their first win against the Steelers since I think it was around October or November of 2014. To give you an idea of how long ago that was for me, Austin, that was my freshman year of college. And that, prior to that, this is really only the second time this decade the Browns have beaten the Steelers. And to have such a big momentous win, yeah, they still might not have made the playoffs, but 2 straight wins for the Browns, it was a big deal for them, and it's been completely overshadowed. But I mean, such appears to be life for the Browns. But you ready to kind of shift focus into this game now?
I'm ready.
All right. Well, there's several places we could go, but let's start with the injuries coming out of this game. And I'm talking about, stuff prior to the very end of the game. First and foremost, Ola Adeniyi suffered an early injury. He suffered a concussion on special teams, which vaulted linebacker Jaron Elliott to significant playing time because Anthony Chickillo was not active for this game. So Adeniyi, that means you suffered loss of depth at outside linebacker and on special teams. Any word on him at this point?
I haven't seen anything. I just saw that he tweeted he'll be okay. Other than that, no.
I haven't seen anything on Artie Burns either. He suffered a hamstring injury. It was a non-contact. I actually thought it was like a knee injury when I saw it live. I thought he was done.
Yeah, probably. It looked, when you get those non-contact like leg injuries, it's usually an MCL or ACL. So it's fortunate it was only a hamstring and probably just a strain.
So hopefully he will be back soon. And then these are the 3 big ones. We'll get to the offensive struggles in a bit, but the first one is running back James Conner. He re-aggravated his AC joint injury that he suffered against the Dolphins a few weeks ago. I'm assuming this happened around the end of the first quarter. I was checking ESPN's play-by-play. It didn't specify, but Conner didn't touch the ball after the first quarter, and he's out again on a week-to-week basis, so he's probably going to miss this week against the Bengals, and at this point, I wouldn't be shocked if he misses 2 or 3 weeks. It's quite obvious at this point that he came back too early. He was not running like James Conner normally runs, and he got re-injured, and it's just another injury for a guy that struggled staying healthy throughout his career. And I feel for the guy because I know how badly he wants to play, but I think I'm noticing a trend, at least with the team this year. A lot of times we'll see the Steelers will play guys when they're injured, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't go if they don't feel like if they shouldn't go if they. Let me just back this up. If a player can play and they're cleared to play, I'm all in favor of them playing, but sometimes I think situations need to be examined from a unique perspective because each situation is different. And I'm talking, trying to remind people about what happened with Dante Moncrief this year, what happened with Sammy Coates a few years ago when they dislocated or broke their fingers and they were rushed back into the fold. And as a result, they ended up dropping a ton of passes and they weren't the same after that. So, those are two specific instances. But you've got a guy in James Conner who's been banged up all year. And I guess the team knows best, but I think it was quite clear from the get-go that he was not his normal self, and I think that he was brought back too soon.
Yeah, it's probably true, especially with James Conner's injury history. Probably should have been kept out a little bit longer, but he probably said he was ready to go because he didn't even show up on the injury report. So, what can you do?
I don't know. It's just another frustrating ding up for James Conner, who's he's probably going to miss at least 2 more games, I think. And if he comes back soon, too quickly again, what's to say he doesn't end up being lost for the season? We're running out of game here. So you're walking a fine line between you need your best running back versus you want to preserve him because you don't want to continue tacking onto those injuries. It's been a rough year for James, and I feel for him.
Yeah, it's been tough.
Another guy who's been struggling with injuries this year is Juju Smith-Schuster. He had his second concussion in his NFL career, maybe his third. He was hit in the head twice on a play by Browns players, and he also injured his knee. I guess it was on that play as well. So there are doubts as to whether or not he'll be able to return for this week's game against the Bengals. And so you're talking, before halftime, you're without your top 2 skill position players. It was not looking good.
And not at all. You're down to your preseason roster almost at this point, and then one more injury later, and you're at your preseason roster.
And that preseason roster was in effect after Deontay Johnson suffered a concussion himself midway through the third quarter after he was given a dirty headshot by safety Demarius Randall on a deep pass. Randall's hit was reviewed for targeting, and he was then ejected before the next play. Johnson's injury was particularly unsettling to those viewing on TV because he was seen bleeding on camera from his ear on the sideline after the hit. But luckily, the bleeding wasn't anything internal with him, so that's good. So it's just if you want to call it a standard concussion, I guess. I don't think that's the right way to call it, but nothing out of the ordinary there besides a concussion, so that's good to see. But you're looking at going into next week without your top 2 wide receivers and your top running back. So, not good for a Steelers offense that has already been struggling. So, I'm not going to say that this was entirely Thursday night football because sometimes that's just football. It's a physical game. But Thursday night games tend to wreak havoc on teams, and the Steelers could not avoid the injury bug on Thursday night.
Not at all. You're left with your top 3 wide receivers is James Washington, Tevin Jones, and then Johnny Holton. You're not really looking good, and that's it. That's your wide receiver core for the rest of the game, and that was at the halfway point. So it wasn't good. And for a minute it was scary too because T.J. Watt left the game, right? T.J. Watt left the game after the Oladini injury, and he had pain on his face, and so now you're outside linebackers were Bud Dupree and Jayrone Elliott, and that was it. You don't have another linebacker behind it. Now your starters are Jayrone Elliott and Bud Dupree, and that's all you got on the outside. I'm sure they would have figured something out with the inside linebackers. Robert Spillane was active for the game. They probably would have moved to him there in case of emergency or something like that, but that's still not ideal. Or they probably would have employed 3 inside linebacker sets with Mark Barron, Devin Bush, and Vince Williams, but scary. It was bad night for injuries. Luckily, T.J. Watt came back, but.
So where would you like to go from here? Do you want to talk about offense, defense, special teams?
Let's talk about offense. Let's go with the offensive side of things.
All right. So there's not really anything to hang your hat on here. So I guess we could almost go position group by position group. So why don't we start with the offensive line, Austin? Because I just want to say that the big thing about Thursday night games, other than the lack of recovery time, is the lack of ability to prepare for a game like this. And for the offensive line, I think the lack of time to heal or physically prepare for this kind of game I think it showed very much in this game. And they got, again, all season they have not gotten a big push in the ground game, and they got beat up front when it comes to pass protection. I mean, Mason Rudolph got sacked 4 times, and he got hit a handful of other times. The offensive line, which has been a strength all year, and you could argue maybe besides the 49ers game against a very good defensive front and at times against the Patriots, and at times against Aaron Donald last week. But for the most part, this group, for all the struggles they had in run blocking, they were excelling in pass protection, and they struggled mightily all over the field. I think maybe with the exception of David DeCastro, I felt like every offensive lineman struggled at one point. And Alejandro Villanueva, in particular, had one of his worst games of the season against Myles Garrett, and it was just tough sledding. The offense just couldn't get anything going. The running backs had no room to move the ball, and Rudolph had no time to deliver the ball as well.
It's a pretty rough outing for them. I mean, they've already been struggling with the run blocking, and that continued in this game. But like you said, there's the pass block in this game that really came down. I mean, they gave up 4 sacks in this game. Part of that's on Mason Rudolph as well. But, it was rough. They were getting pushed back into Mason Rudolph. The pocket was collapsing in about 2 seconds around him. He was having no time to throw. It was probably their worst game. I would say it was even worse than the 49ers game, if I'm being honest.
I would agree with you because I think they were able, knowing now what we know about the Niners front, I think they held up pretty well. And not that the Browns don't have a good defensive front, but it's not as star-studded as we know. Myles Garrett was basically the only guy that was getting consistent pressure. And one thing that was also troubling is that there were several plays where there were stunts and disguised blitzes where they had enough guys to do the blocking, and they were not able to pick them up, and Rudolph was pressured. So just an overall bad game from the offensive line. One of the few times I think we've said that, overall, we've had games, obviously this year, where the run blocking hasn't been good. There have been games over the years where the pass protection hasn't been good, but the run blocking has been good. It's been very rare over the past half decade where both have been very bad. And I was worried that in a game on a short rest, you're on the road, Thursday night game, and for a divisional opponent, that's usually a recipe to get out physical, and that happened in this game. So the offensive line failed on Thursday, and beyond that, let's transition to the running game. It struggled. All the running backs did not look good. Jalen Samuels struggled again. He doesn't have great ball carrier vision, and while he did have a lot of success against the Patriots last season, I think what we're seeing this year with Samuels is that he is a guy that did not carry the ball much at all in his high school or college career. Remember, he carried the ball a career-high number of times against the Patriots last season in that game. He had never carried the ball more than that in a single game in high school or college. So you've got a guy that has a very small sample size when it comes to running the ball, and I think it shows because he doesn't seem to make very good decisions when it comes to reading where he's supposed to go. And I think that's just the case with an inexperienced back like him. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm not disappointed by him, because I am, but I also was not as high on him coming into this year as others were. I think he serves a purpose as a pass-catching back, but his pass protection needs improvement, and his overall running needs to get a little bit more consistent. And he also drops the ball too often. I just wanted to put that out there too. So he has not been good this year. He's been disappointing. And besides that, once James Conner went out, you're down to Trey Edmonds, who is okay, but again, he struggles with his reads. He's not a very dynamic carrier of the football. And Tony Brooks-James, while elusive, is not a good pass protector, and it doesn't even matter because he was waived. So there's not a lot going on in this running back room, man. It really sucks to see James Conner go out with an injury, because now there's not really a good pure running back on this team besides Benny Snell, and he is unproven as well, and he's injured. So there's nothing to hang your hat on with this running back room right now. And by the way, we mentioned it a ton of times. There's no Roosevelt Nixon there, so that's another key component of the blocking game for the rushing attack that is not there.
Yeah, it's just kind of a rough group of guys that are not really going well together at the moment, especially with how the offensive line has played, as we just said. It's just been not good for them as a whole. I mean, Jalen Samuels had, one good rush, so did Trey Edmonds, but, when you're only getting one good rush and then the rest of it is shut down, it sucks. Actually, I mean, you look at the stats, and Jalen Samuels actually looks like he did okay, but he didn't. He rushed 5 times for 26 yards. It's an average of 5 yards a carry. But one of those was a long 11-yard run, so you take that away, and it's 4 for 15. That's still okay, actually. But the point being, it just besides that one run, it wasn't that good. And Trey Edmonds just isn't the guy. He's mostly a special teamer, and I like him for that. But he's not supposed to be the guy. I mean, you wish James Conner was playing, but even when James Conner was there, 5 rushes for 10 yards isn't great, especially when one run gave him 7 yards. So,
and beyond that, there was one, I just wanted to say, sorry, there was one run, tell me if you remember this, where James Conner was in one-on-one with Greedy Williams. And remember, I said Greedy Williams is not a good run stopper when we looked at him pre-draft, and James Conner couldn't break a tackle. That's a situation where you need your running back to make a play, and when he couldn't make that play, that's when I knew something was wrong with him.
Yeah, I do remember that. It was really rough because it was just one-on-one with a cornerback. I don't even care which cornerback it is. I really wish he just broke it off anyway, just pushed him down to the side. But and they even said it. They said on the cast that Greedy Williams was regarded as not a good tackler coming out, and he made that tackle, so good for him. But it sucked watching.
Indeed, and there's just. There's really concerns about the running attack or rushing attack. We haven't seen them produce besides the Chargers game and the Dolphins game this year. Just not good enough all around. And then in the passing game, the tight ends haven't been great in the run blocking either. But you were talking about the preseason roster. That was evident in the wide receiver room. Juju Smith-Schuster leaves with an injury. Deontay Johnson leaves with an injury. And you're down to basically James Washington as your only regular receiver. You've got Tevin Jones called up from the practice squad a day earlier. You've got a guy in Johnny Holton who managed to catch a pass, which I would not have believed if you hadn't said it on Twitter, Austin, because all I saw was a ton of targets. So he caught 1 on 7 targets in this past game. So I think it was 12 or 13 targets before he finally caught 1 this year. So, when you need to rely on Johnny Holton and Tevin Jones for about 30 to 40 snaps per game, you're not going to win, and that's what happened. So, it sucks that this wide receiver room has been decimated with injuries, but, at the same time, all these guys had, I think we saw on Twitter there were something like 10 different plays where a receiver could have caught a ball. It was, tough catches, most of them, but they're paid to make those catches, and they didn't. They just were not above the line on Thursday.
I thought the wide receivers really struggled, especially Holton. I have no idea what Holton has on, the Rooney family or whatever, but he does not deserve to be on a roster. Give me anyone at this point. Give me Terrell Pryor. Give me Des Bryant. Give me, some random guy off the street. Give me especially Eli Rogers. I don't know what – Eli Rogers is the opposite. I don't know what Eli Rogers did to the Rooneys that they're so mad and hate him so much, but not bringing him back after this game was, to me, a mistake. But whatever. Regardless, Holton shouldn't be rostered at this point. I've been saying this for quite a while now. I've known this for quite a while. You literally could basically put me out there and just tell me run in a straight line, and I'll do it. I'll run a straight line for you guys. I might not be as fast as Johnny Holton, but all that Johnny Holton is doing is pulling one guy to his side every game because no one's watching out for Johnny Holton. Johnny Holton had no catches coming into this game, and he had no catches going in halfway through this game. And he only had one long one, and that's it. I don't know, man. You could sign a guy off the street to do what Johnny Holton's doing. To me, he doesn't deserve a roster spot. the special teams is bad. Can we take a break for 1 second and time out and say the special teams is bad? So keeping us a Steelers special teams player, to me, is not. It doesn't matter. I don't care if he's an okay one. The special teams as a whole is bad. Like, you need to start replacing these players with guys that are going to be good at it. And maybe it's Danny Smith. Maybe these players are good at it. And it's just Danny isn't training them well. Whatever. I just think you need to rebuild. And for Holton's special teams ability, which is, for the most part, not been impressive to me. It's been okay. Like, it's been decent. He runs straight fast. Like, he's Darius Hayward-Bay. Good. Awesome. Glad that's a thing. But, like, that's it. Like, you could have anyone do that. I don't know, man. I'm just not big on Johnny Holton. Not just to... I mean, I love ripping on Johnny Holton because I'm still salty about the Tazar Skipper situation, that he was the one picked over Tazar Skipper. But it wasn't just him. I mean, other wide receivers didn't step up. You want James Washington to do a little bit more with his 5 targets. He only got 3 receptions for 49 yards. I mean, I didn't expect much from Tevin Jones, so and his 2 for 24 was actually decent in my mind because I wasn't expecting anything out of him. And then just really, even before they got hurt, you wanted Juju and Deontay to step up a little bit more. I mean, Juju dropped a pass in this game, which was really annoying. He's been hit. He has had this problem ever since being drafted. When he's wide open is when he'll drop those really easy catches, and it's really, really frustrating because it's just bad. Like, when you're open and there's no one on you, you got to make those catches for your team when you're a wide receiver 1. Like, it's what you have to do. But I can't harp on him too bad. He left early, so he couldn't really finish his stat line. Deontay Johnson, same thing. I can't really complain about Johnson for what he did while I was there. He actually looked decent, but, I mean, left early. And now you're left with your literal preseason roster. You have Mason Rudolph starting. Your running back is Trey Edmonds and Jalen Samuels. And your wide receivers are Johnny Holton, Tevin Jones, and James Washington. That is literally a preseason roster minus the offensive line.
So, that being the case, is it really any surprise that Mason Rudolph struggled as much as he did?
No, I still think that Rudolph was bad in this game, though.
He was.
I think Rudolph could have been better, to say the least. I'm not going to... there's a lot to blame, because even before the injuries, Rudolph was darting it behind players. One of his interceptions was really bad. And then another one with the Vance McDonald interception, he overthrew his big tight end. I mean, he had to put it perfectly, and he just didn't, so that was an upsetting one as well. So, like, I don't vindicate Mason Rudolph for this game. Maybe it goes a little bit, because there was that pass to Johnny Holton that it hit Johnny Holton in the hands where Holton should have mossed this guy. It was a bad throw by Mason Rudolph. It was ill-advised. It shouldn't have even been able to touch Holton's hands, but, like, you want Holton to get that to make it, hit Holton's stats better, to make Mason Rudolph's stats better. Like you said, there's a few balls in this game that were just dropped where you pay the wide receiver to catch these, and so that hurt Mason Rudolph as well. But I can't vindicate Rudolph from how bad he played in this game. I think that if Juju and Deontay stayed in, I still would have been saying, yeah, Mason Rudolph had a bad game for sure, and actually probably worse if Smith-Schuster and Johnson stayed, because then he wouldn't have any excuses. Here you could have the excuse that he was down his top 2 wide receivers and running back for this game. So I thought Mason Rudolph was not good.
Yeah, he was really bad. He was really, really bad. And I thought I saw some really nice things coming out of the Rams game, but from what I saw in this game, again, my concern coming into this game, it's why I picked the Browns to win, was coming off a big win at home. You're on the road playing a divisional opponent. You're playing the Browns for the first time in their stadium. I didn't think Mason Rudolph was going to play very well. And then you've got the injuries on top of it, the poor play of the offensive line, no running game. And it's not surprising he didn't play well. His team didn't help him. But at the same time, like you're kind of alluding to, he didn't help his teammates either. That second interception that he threw behind Tevin Jones, was that a Joe Schobert interception, I believe it was?
I believe it was Joe Schobert, yeah.
That was a terrible throw. It was so bad at first that I thought maybe Tevin Jones ran the wrong route and was supposed to sit there, but upon further review, it looks like Rudolph just missed it that badly. I mean, Rudolph was not comfortable in this game. He was struggling with his progressions. He was making poor decisions, and with a guy that's so big on preparation as Rudolph is, I don't think it's that surprising that he struggled, but it's just I don't know. There was not a lot that I liked from this game from him, and I don't know. There's just you really look at his whole game. The turnovers were inexcusable. He slid into more pressure in this game. He needs to understand that it's not going to be perfect. You've got to be able to pull the trigger. He just seemed indecisive to me, really. And I know he's been indecisive this whole season, but it just felt especially bad to me on Thursday.
I agree. He's really struggling with this decision making and reads. Reads for him have been a big struggle in this, and there was one of his things coming out on his profile for when he was being reviewed as a draftee. It was that he wasn't asked to do complicated reads in college, and he's really struggling with that. I feel like he's not finding the right reads. He's not getting his checkdowns when he needs his checkdowns. He's not knowing when to throw it deep. He's really struggling with finding his man at the NFL level, and I don't know if it's going to improve, but it really should.
Well, what's interesting is that, again, I'm alluding to the whole preparation thing because Rudolph is a big guy that he puts a lot into his prep, and I think it showed. If you go back and watch the Vance McDonald touchdown against the Indianapolis Colts, Mason Rudolph goes through every single read on that play before finally finding McDonald for a touchdown. That shows that he can do it. So he's not doing it consistently, and again, I think he's trying to be too perfect. And that, what was that play? I think it was that 4th and 1 where Johnny Holton was on a short mesh crosser, short crossing route over the middle. If he finds him sooner, not only is that a conversion, that might be a touchdown because you see on the replay there's no one close to Holton. So when Rudolph, it'd be bad enough if Rudolph didn't see Holton at all because there was a lot in front of him, but he did see him and he didn't pull the trigger when he should have. He waited, and then by the time he threw it, I think it was deflected at the line. You remember the play, right?
I do remember the play. It was just not good. It was deflected at the line.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't want to, the entire offense was terrible, but so was he. There was very little to take away, very little good to take away from it. And I wanted to point out that, it's tough when your offensive line plays badly, and you've got, injuries at the skill positions, but at the same time, you have to be able to make adjustments. You have to be able to throw quickly. You have to be able to be decisive. And like you said, he struggled with that. And I feel like he just doesn't know how to throw the ball from a muddy pocket, I just feel like if the pocket is collapsing, he just crumbles. He doesn't stand tall and make a throw.
No, he's definitely doesn't have that quality like Ben Roethlisberger did, which is a shame. But, you can't expect every quarterback to have it. But he definitely doesn't have that factor to him like Ben does.
Remember I told you before, I felt like Rudolph and Roethlisberger are like polar opposites in terms of quarterback play style. Rudolph much closer resembles what he seems like he could be to a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning instead of a Ben Roethlisberger or Aaron Rodgers. He seems like the kind of guy that you would expect to go through your reads real quick, find your guy, throw the ball to him quickly, a quick rhythm kind of thrower. And he's shown that he can do that at times, but he hasn't done it consistently enough. And it's the same issue again and again. So we'll get into next week, beyond. But this was his worst game so far. I don't think there's any doubting that.
Yeah, it was his worst game. He's never thrown 4 interceptions at the college or NFL level. So, that's already it was record bad for him already.
But quarterbacks will have bad games as well. So, it happens. So now the question is, how does he perform coming off of this poor game? Final thoughts on the offense. Randy Fichtner, what'd you think about his game plan? I didn't think it was great, but we've been over it already. There's just talent depletion when it comes to those injuries, and I don't really know what there is to say. There's just nothing for this offense to hang its hat on, and as much as talent has played a problem in the offense, Fichtner is also partially to blame too.
3rd and short. I don't know what he has to do, but he has to figure out something that works on 3rd and short. I think that's been 3rd and 4th and short. The Steelers are terrible in short yardage situations. They only convert 3rd and short 28% of the time. That's the league worst. And they almost complete 3rd and long just as much. They complete 27% of their third and long. And you know how bad they started on third down in the beginning of the year. I mean, they're still not good at it, but regardless, like, that's terrible. Like, on third and short, you need... Oh my God, how could we not talk about that? Fichtner actually put a quarterback sneak in this game.
Yeah, that's right.
There's a quarterback sneak in this game from Mason Rudolph. Oh my God.
Hey, it worked.
It worked. I guess he found out that, wow, nothing on third and short is working, but we used a quarterback sneak, and wow, miraculously, it works. Maybe we should use it some more.
And then they didn't.
That was the only time. And they were put more into third and one again, and they couldn't get it. Fourth and one, didn't get it, got deflected. So it's almost like the quarterback sneak should be used more. I said when it happened that, honestly, I would give Randy Fichtner props, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mason Rudolph was like, nah, we're get in the huddle. We're just doing a quarterback sneak right now. But I'll give Randy Fichtner props for that, but everything else, he needs to figure out how to be able to convert on third and short way better than 28%, 28% like he has now. Like, that's ridiculous and bad.
So all the Steelers' struggles on third and fourth and short. Now, I just want to point out that I think it's third and short, or I think it was, third and fourth and 1. The Steelers this season are 4 of 16, I believe is the number. Just to give you an idea of how much 2 games have influenced it, against the Patriots and Browns, so opening night and this past game, they were a combined 1 for 9. So they haven't exactly been, they haven't been blowing the doors off, but these 2 games have really influenced that number greatly. But at the same time, you see how much it has influenced results. I mean, the Steelers lost by 14 points in this game. They were down by just 7 for a good chunk of the game. I mean, they had their chances, and being able to convert those, if you can't convert those, we already know how tough it is for this team to convert third and long. If you can't convert those third and fourth and shorts, which I think that makes it all the more miraculous that they managed to convert that 4th and 1 against the Rams last week. Oh, and by the way, why are they calling that play again? There's one option on that play, and it was covered because they ran the same damn play a week ago, 3 days before.
I don't know, man. I question a lot about what they do.
So, I mean, I was going to kind of say, we can have a full discussion later, but that was going to be kind of my big thing about Randy Fichtner is, Austin, if you're an offensive coordinator, this is just my personal opinion, but if I'm asking you, you're Randy Fichtner, and I ask you this question, what is your team's offensive identity? You have to be able to give me an answer. You have to be able to give me a definitive answer, or you at least have to say, we want to do this. We are trying to do this. We are actively attempting to do this. And when you when you can't have a definitive answer or say we're trying to do this, I think that's a huge indictment. And I'm not suggesting that Fichtner should get fired at the end of the year, but I think that right now you can't answer that question truthfully. Well, I mean, there is no offensive identity.
Not at all. I mean, what could you even say that they are right now? Like, they don't do anything really good. They don't do anything, and they're not really trying to do anything really good. It doesn't seems like they're still trying to figure out what their identity is 3/4 of the way through the year. So, They do a great job of padding their punter stats. They do. Jordan Berry almost averaged 50 yards a punt this game. He was 2 yards off, so he's at like 49 point, probably 8 or 9 for his punts.
And on a day where even Berry was awesome, he still wasn't because he messed up a hold that caused Chris Boswell to miss a field goal.
Yep, and still somehow the Steelers' field goal kicking was better than the
Browns, yeah.
Better than the Browns, yeah.
Yeah, so the Browns, and now I guess we can switch sides now. There's not as much to say about the defense. Look, I said this, we were both saying this. At some point, the Steelers' defense isn't going to be able to bail you out with a few huge plays, and they weren't able to force a turnover in this game. So the big plays didn't come, and they struggled early on. They yielded that quick opening touchdown drive, and then they gave up a second touchdown drive early in the second quarter. But from that point on, they really did batten down the hatches, even though the Browns were able to get 2 field goal attempts off. I thought the defense played well enough to win, but that example that we were fearful of, if the defense wasn't going to be able to come up with a turnover or two at least, they weren't going to be able to win the game, and that's what happened. I mean, only 7 points for. They only gave up 21 points, and they were given a very short field to defend with the game basically over at the end. But, they weren't without their warts in this one, but at the same time, I still thought they played well enough to win.
Oh yeah, I thought the defense was decent. I mean, they didn't get the picks and the turnovers like we've been accustomed to, but they still were playing shutout not completely shutout, but they were still playing enough that they kept the Browns to 21. I mean, that's not terrible. They gave up 3 touchdowns, one in the first, second, and fourth quarter, and that's it. I mean, really, this loss is on the offense for sure. I mean, blame it on injuries or whatever, but like the defense played well enough to win.
And they gave up less than 300 yards. And if you want to point to one thing besides giving up that opening drive touchdown, the big difference in this game was that Baker Mayfield, although he wasn't great, he made the plays that he needed to make to win this game. And I think there were like 3 or 4 occasions where he escaped the pocket, kind of like how we're used to seeing Ben Roethlisberger do, and he'd find a man downfield. Once it was Kareem Hunt, once it was Jarvis Landry. Those handful of plays, that there were a couple explosive plays, I think, from that. That was really the biggest difference in the game, because other than that opening drive touchdown and that second long drive, the Browns didn't really move the ball either.
Not at all. Yeah, no, they were pretty much struggling. I mean, like you said, there was like that one play to like Kareem Hunt where Mark Barron couldn't get him down, and it gave Kareem Hunt an explosive play. And really, it was just like you said, it was Baker Mayfield getting out of the pocket, creating throws. It was good for him. I thought Baker Mayfield actually had a good game, just not amazing, but I thought he did good escaping the sacks and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's where the Browns' offense basically came from, was like 4 or 5 plays where he escaped the pocket, plus that one early throw to Beckham Jr. And I mean, he wasn't spectacular, but he made the plays he needed to make for his team to win. And obviously they did enough to win. So, that's the big difference, is Baker Mayfield made the big plays and Mason Rudolph didn't. The wide receivers and running backs for the Cleveland Browns made the big plays. The Steelers' skill position players didn't. That's really all it comes down to. And if this game was played on a Sunday, maybe it'd be a little different. I do think that the physicality aspect swings in favor of the home team on Thursday night games, especially in home divisional games, or especially in divisional games on Thursday night. And you add that into the equation that Mason Rudolph was playing the Browns for the first time in Cleveland, and all the injuries, maybe we shouldn't have been as surprised. But obviously, still a very disappointing result nonetheless.
Yeah, you wish it went better, but I mean, it is what it is. It's Thursday night football on the road. You're going to drop some games that you shouldn't. That's football. You're going to drop some games to some worse teams. You're going to drop some bad games that you probably should have won, but you just got to move on to the next week.
And mind you, the Steelers have not played well in Cleveland since 2016. They struggled in that season opener in 2017 where they barely beat the Browns 21-18, and then they had that tie where Ben Roethlisberger had 5 turnovers in week 1 last season. As I'm sure you remember, there were that was an ugly game too. So the Steelers haven't played a complete game in Cleveland since 2016. So it's been a while, but you move on from this. You're 5-5. You're behind a couple teams in the AFC playoff picture, but you're not out of it yet. But you get an opportunity to rest up, and you get to play the Bengals on the road. So it's an important time to gather yourself, lick your wounds, and go out and prove that you can still win these key games here. So there's still a handful of games left, and you can make a good reverse the narrative if you can string together a few more games here. You climbed out of the hole, so now you can go back, start over. You're 0-0 kind of, one game at a time.
Sir.
All right. So that being the case, that was the wild kickoff to what was an interesting week around the NFL. And one game that, we'll start with the Sunday games. One game that caught everyone by surprise. Again, the Atlanta Falcons not only beat the Carolina Panthers, they absolutely bludgeoned them. And I'm not sure what happened. I don't know who woke up or why everyone was sleepwalking through the Falcons' first 8 games. But all of a sudden, they've won 2 straight games in pretty impressive fashion. This time giving up just 3 points to the Panthers on the road and picking off Kyle Allen 4 times. A huge win for the Falcons, who all of a sudden realize that maybe they are better than what their record says they are.
I have no idea why they decided to come on late. Now they're just messing up their draft pick. But I mean, whatever. I mean, I guess they're like, hey, if we're gonna win, we're at least gonna mess with our division and make things weird. So they've just destroyed their 2 division opponents. I mean, I don't know. I forget if they played the Buccaneers twice already, or if they even played the Buccaneers yet at all. But
I'll check that for you.
I'm just waiting for that Buccaneers game. They're gonna just destroy them like 40-0. Because they've just been taking their division in just the past 2 weeks and just rubbing the floor with them.
Oh, yeah, they do. They actually play them this... So they actually play... What in the... All right, so you ready to hear the divisional games for the Falcons? So they played none going into their bye week. Out of the bye, they got the Saints. You remember they won 26-9. They beat the Panthers. This week they host the Buccaneers. Then they host the Saints. Then they host the Panthers.
Holy, they play 5 straight division games?
Yeah, and then they end the season in Tampa. So hold up now. Is there still a chance that they could run the table here and make it in, man?
They're going to have the best division record out of all the wild card teams and make it. They're going to run the table, dude. Falcons going to do it.
I'm not even kidding. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this before. They just dominated 2 divisional opponents on the road. They're getting the Buccaneers at home, and then they get the Saints at home. If they can win their next 2 games, next 3 games, let's put it that way, then they'll be what? They'll be 6-7. They'll be 6-7 if they win their next 3 games, and that leaves games against the Niners, Jaguars, and Buccaneers, which means you're probably coming out of that those last 3 games with 1 loss. So you could be looking at an 8-8 Falcons team after starting 1-7.
It's kind of crazy, dude. That is actually really crazy to go on a streak like that. You only lose 1 more game halfway through. That's kind of nuts.
Now, didn't they do the exact opposite of that, like in 2015 or something? I think they were like 7-1, and then they finished 8-8 with that only win at the end of the year coming against the 15-1 Panthers.
Yep, that's exactly what happened with them.
Okay.
They did the opposite.
I'm going to be rooting for that then, because that's exactly what I want to see.
That'd be hilarious. Me too. I'm going to root for it too.
So, anyways, off of that tangent, let's move to the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. The Buffalo Bills get back on a winning track. They're now 7-3, their best start through 10 games in a really, really long time. The Dolphins fall to 2-8. The Bills finally put up a huge offensive number, 37 points in Miami. They were having a good time, and they reassert themselves as the top wild card in the AFC.
Sir, I mean, you hate to see it as a Steelers fan. You want them to keep losing, but I mean, Miami's just not good enough to beat them, so that wasn't unexpected. I thought Miami would keep it a little bit closer, though. I thought Miami was playing better, but not good enough, apparently.
Steelers got no help from their the teams that you would have been rooting for outside of Cleveland, the Cleveland matchup in this week of NFL football. So it was a struggle if you were watching from a Steelers perspective. The Cowboys took care of business against the Lions. It was touch and go there for a bit. Jeff Driscoll and the Lions made it interesting, but the Cowboys were able to put up 35 points and 1 on the road.
Yeah, it's just that Detroit defense is just so bad right now. They really need some help there. Because, I mean, that offense did enough. They did, even with Jeff Driscoll, they were doing enough. It's just the defense kind of let them down, I think.
If only they had a good starting safety that they didn't trade away. Maybe that would have helped.
If only.
The Denver Broncos made things interesting with the Minnesota Vikings, but they blew the lead in the final minutes, and the Minnesota Vikings win again. But it was a close one, 27-23.
I have no idea what happened. I leave my house, it's 20-0 at halftime. I'm like, oh wow, the Broncos are really giving it to them. They're going to win this. Then it's 23-0 coming out of halftime. I'm like, all right, I'm done checking this game. Then, like, I go to Twitter, like, a little bit later, and I see final score, 27-23, Minnesota. And I was like, what just happened, dude? I heard that they really just stopped playing aggressive. Like, Denver, like, gave up the game. You remember the Joe Flacco interview where he said we're not aggressive enough? And I forget what game they lost. I think that was the Colts game when they lost that Joe Flacco had that interview.
Yep.
I heard that was the issue. I heard they just gave up. They rolled over and were like, we're going to try and play to end this game, and they weren't playing aggressive at all, and it lost it for them.
Just another error for a new head coach. So, you hate to see it, but the Broncos, they'll play you tough. They're never out of it, it feels like.
Always. They're always in it.
The Jacksonville Jaguars got Nick Foles back in this one against the Indianapolis Colts, but the Colts also got Jacoby Brissett back, and that was more important as the Colts rolled to a 33-13 victory. The Jaguars now on life support when it comes to their playoff hopes.
Colts had 200-yard rushers in this game. Imagine that. Like, that's it's crazy. They had I forget his name. Marlon Mack is the one, and then the other guy, I don't remember his name. I think Jonathan Williams. They had 200-yard rushers in this game, so they really went hard in this game on the ground. They really pounded the rock, and it worked out really well. Obviously, Colts came out with a big victory, and I still think Jacksonville should have stuck with Minshew, but that's beside the point.
Marlon Mack is going to be out for a handful of weeks. Just be aware of that. The New Orleans Saints came away with a 34-17 victory in Tampa Bay. Jameis Winston leads the league in interceptions, I believe, right?
Yes, and he's going for a record in the most interceptions thrown in a season. He's going to be like the first guy to top 29 since I think like 1989 or something like that. That's where he's heading to.
I don't think he's going to be able to touch the single season record. I think that's like 42.
Oh no! I'm sorry. He wasn't breaking any records for real. It's just that he was going to throw the most interceptions for like 20 years. Is what he's projected for.
I see. Yeah, the NFL record is 42 from George Blanda in 1962. 42 picks, man. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
Times were different then, of course. But in any case, in another tank bowl, the New York Jets defeat the Washington Redskins 34-17. Dwayne Haskins is not ready to play. That was my big concern. Really, the only big red flag I had with Haskins was that I thought that, a guy coming out with such little starting experience in college would be set up to fail in the NFL, especially when you have such a terrible team around him. And that's exactly what happened. That team is terrible.
Yeah, and it's just like no one wants to be there either. I think Redskins are going to be bad for a very long time. It's really until they sell that team that they're going to be a good team again, because they're just not in good hands and no one wants to be there, like, at all.
Nope, it's an ugly situation. An ugly situation is not what we anticipated in Baltimore, but the Ravens absolutely destroyed the Houston Texans 41-7. And, you can kiss the AFC North goodbye. The Ravens are cruising and are now trying to catch the Patriots for the number one seed. And remember, they have the tiebreaker, so I think the Ravens might be the NFL's most complete AFC team. Or, sorry, the AFC's most complete team.
It's pretty incredible, too, because the game wasn't, like, really gone until the end. Like, it was 14-0 going into half, yeah, but it didn't feel like Houston was playing terrible. They kept Baltimore with 0 points in the first quarter. Then Baltimore scored both their touchdowns in quarter two, but it got away from them real quick. I mean, they came out of the half, scored 13 points, then another 14 in the fourth quarter, and it's just the Ravens ran away with it.
The Arizona Cardinals played it close with the 49ers for the second time in 3 weeks. But the 49ers came away with the victory. Jimmy Garoppolo made a few mistakes, but also led a game-winning touchdown drive, and that late defensive touchdown didn't matter for our line, but it mattered for a lot of people because a lot of lines had a 10-point margin, and that defensive touchdown made it 10 points.
Yeah, you hate to see it for that. But my man Demontre Moore from the San Diego Fleet signed off the street last week. He forced the game-winning fumble. I am happy for my man. So I love that, dude. I didn't see it till way later. I think I saw it literally yesterday because I didn't watch this game at all. But I respect that. And also, they gave the Cardinals, they gave the Niners way too big of a line in this game, especially after last time. I don't know, man. 13.5 was a lot for this matchup.
key difference between the Cardinals and the Steelers offense. The Cardinals may not be very talented on offense, but they have an identity.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The Cincinnati Bengals went to the Coliseum to play the Oakland Raiders, and they kept it close, but the Bengals were officially eliminated from playoff contention, losing their 10th game of the season, falling to 0-10, and the Raiders escaped with a 17-10 victory and are nipping at the Chiefs' heels for the AFC West lead.
Yeah, man, the Bengals put up a fight here, so good for them. I thought they might have possibly won. They were up 7-0 in the first quarter, but they just weren't able to put up enough to win the game. I've been very disappointed in Tyler Boyd. I wanted more out of him, and he only caught one ball for 0 yards. Like, I've always loved Tyler Boyd. He came out of Pitt, obviously. Most of you guys probably know that. And he's just been disappointing for me, man. I've been disappointed with how he's played. But, yeah, Oakland escapes with a narrow 17-10 victory.
He actually came out and said that he was disappointed that he hasn't been targeted more on offense. And this was a game you really wanted to see the Bengals come through because now the Raiders are ahead of the Steelers. And you wouldn't expect to get a win from the Bengals, but if they do win, maybe you feel better about them. Maybe, thinking, oh, they got that monkey off their back going into the Steelers game next week. But nope, they'll still be looking for their first win. If it weren't the Bengals, I'd say Zach Taylor's going to be out after year one. He's just not an NFL head coach.
Not at all, man. He's been struggling with this team. I mean, granted, the Bengals are a bad team, but I feel like they should have gotten one win by now.
I think even Marvin Lewis would have been able to get this team to a couple wins by now.
Maybe this is what they're scared of. This is why they want to fire Marvin Lewis. They'd rather mediocrity than just being bad.
It has been ugly.
They needed this.
Yeah, they did. But it has been ugly, and ugly is another way to describe the matchup between the Patriots and the Eagles. The polar opposite of what we saw from Super Bowl 52, which was a high-scoring affair. This time a low-scoring defensive slugfest. The Eagles come out and they score early, but besides that opening drive, they really didn't do anything on offense. And the Patriots, again, they do just enough to come away with the victory, but that offense does not look good at all. In fact, I think it's looking worse week by week.
Honestly, I mean, Tom Brady came out and said that defense is what's carrying them. But he said that they might be able. They're going to find it. They think they're going to find their identity later in the year, like they did last year, because they came alive in December last year as well. That's when they offense started playing good. So, I mean, as long as the Patriots defense keeps playing the way they are, it doesn't really even matter.
That was kind of the story of the Chicago Bears season last year. But their defense has not held up. It's not been able to hold up the offense as it did last year. The offense was able to at least carry its own weight a little bit. This year, the Bears' offense rivaling that of the Steelers, except the Steelers are using a third-round pick at quarterback and not the number 2 overall pick that you traded up from. Never forget, Mitchell Trubisky, the Bears traded up for him when Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes were on the board. You remind a Bears fan that every day, and I'm sure they hear it every day. 7 points on the road against the Rams, and even though Jared Goff and the Rams offense struggled, they still looked far more impressive than the Bears. Mitchell Trubisky got benched at the end of the game. They said with a hip injury, but my God, that offense is terrible. And low-key, Matt Nagy is not a good coach. I'm telling you that.
Yeah, he's not been good at all for them this year. He's not been doing anything for them. But, I mean, I think part of the problem is Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, he's just so bad. I mean, when you're completing 24 balls for only 190 yards, it's terrible. That is absolutely trash.
And like we were saying with the Steelers offense, what can you hang your hat on for the Bears besides Allen Robinson?
Absolutely nothing. Their offense is the least talented offense in the league. It's devoid of talent.
It is indeed terrible, for sure. All right, and then Monday Night Football from Mexico City, actually a pretty solid game. The Chargers controlled it in the first half, but didn't have a lead to show for it thanks to a missed field goal and other missed opportunities. And then down 7 with the game in his hands, Phillip Rivers throws a ball to the end zone. That is picked off. For the second week in a row, Phillip Rivers throws a game-sealing interception, and the Chargers fall to 4-7, 0-3 in the division, all but ending their chances at making the playoffs. And you have to wonder if this is it for Phillip Rivers in Los Angeles with the Chargers. It's looking worse and worse. by the week.
Yeah, 4 interceptions in this game. He's probably the reason why LA lost this game. It's really tough. I think this really is going to be his last year with the Chargers. I didn't think that going in, but I feel like he's going to move somewhere else.
It's not been a good look for them at all, but that being the case, there's still a little time, but they need to win out and get help. And the Chiefs managed to stay just ahead of the Raiders, who are still hot on their tail. The Packers, Seahawks, Giants, and Titans were all on byes this week. So that wraps up NFL's Week 11. This upcoming week, Week 12, is the last week of NFL byes, so that's something to look forward to. Let's shift our focus to some Steelers news. There was a lot of roster moves coming up. So first things first, I just wanted to mention that Patrick Morris, the center, has not been called up officially from the practice squad, but I'd expect that to happen soon, with B.J. Finney being the only active center on the roster, with Marquise Pouncey set to serve his suspension, so just be on the lookout for that. Beyond that, let's go back in time. The Steelers placed Roosevelt Nix, their fullback, and wide receiver Ryan Switzer on injured reserve ahead of the Browns game, and signed outside linebacker Jayrone Elliott and wide receiver Tevin Jones to the active roster for the game. And thank God they signed Jayrone Elliott, because he ended up having to play some significant snaps, and it didn't even matter because they cut him, didn't they? Yeah, they did.
They cut him.
Oh, man. Thanks for your service, bud. We'll see you next week.
Things come at you fast. Life comes at you fast.
And it sure does. The Steelers signed 2 players off of practice squads this week. They signed Deion Kane, a receiver from the Colts, and running back Kareth White Jr. from the Bears. So because they were signed from active rosters and poached from practice squads onto the active roster, they will have to be on the active roster for the next 3 weeks. So, and the corresponding moves, they cut Jayrone Elliott and running back Tony Brooks-James. And they also made some moves on the practice squad, cutting receiver Terry Wright and linebacker Sutton Smith once again, signing former Pittsburgh wide receiver and return man Quadri Henderson and wide receiver Amara Darboh, who was a third-round pick back in 2017. And they also signed Ralph Webb, a running back, to the practice squad, who was with the team during the offseason process and in the early portion of training camp. So, my goodness, a bunch of moves, but it looks like they're all injury-related. So that's telling me that Juju Smith-Schuster and James Conner and Deontay Johnson are probably not going to play, like we said at the beginning of the show.
It's not looking good. They stocked up on those wide receivers for a reason, and it's looking like they're going to be down Johnson and Juju. I have a better feeling about Johnson because Juju has that knee injury as well, and that they think that the knee injury is what's actually going to keep him out this week. But with Johnson, I have a little bit more hope, but I don't think either are going to play.
We'll keep that monitored throughout the week, but a lot of moves being made by the Steelers right now. So we'll keep you abreast as to what's going on. Let's switch to NFL news now. We saw Morgan Burnett playing a pretty good game against the Steelers on Thursday, but he is now done for the season. He tore his Achilles, and it sucks for him because he was having one of his best games of the season against one of his former teams. And, as a Steelers fan, you hated to see it, but, it sucks for him at the same time. So any thoughts on that?
No, it sucks that he's out for the season. He was actually having a good year, which was good for him, but just kind of pisses me off. But, I still didn't want him to be hurt.
The Carolina Panthers owner David Tepper, former minority owner of the Steelers, frustrated by the latest loss to the Falcons, says that he's not going to continue to accept long-term mediocrity. The Panthers are at 5-5 and could be looking to change at head coach with Ron Rivera and at quarterback with Cam Newton going into the next season. Do you think they're going to make some changes, pull the trigger on some of these moves?
I have no idea. Kyle Allen played so bad, so they might want to stick with Cam Newton. I have no idea what they're going to do. I couldn't tell you what the Panthers should do either. They have quite the... I don't like Cam Newton, so I think it's time to move on from him, but I don't know, is the team going to trade for him? Do you keep him as a backup? That's an expensive backup. Do you let him keep fighting for the job when he gets back from injury? Like, what happens here? I don't know. I feel like it's in the offseason it's going to be telling. When they get back to training camp and he is healthy, that's going to be telling.
What about Ron Rivera?
I don't know, man. I think I think they're going to cut Ron Rivera after this season, but I'm not exactly sure. I don't know. I don't know how they feel about the head coach. Like, because I feel like I haven't heard anything else about Ron, like him wanting to for them wanting him out or anything like that. So I don't know.
I have a feeling they're going to make changes just because David Tepper. This is Rivera and Newton were there when Tepper bought the team. I think he's going to want to bring in his own guys now, and he sat patiently for a few years, but I think that he's seen just about enough.
I think that's fair.
The Miami Dolphins have cut loose running back Mark Walton after his latest run-in with the law. The Dolphins were made aware of an incident with police on Tuesday and elected to waive him. Walton has been the most efficient back for the Dolphins for a handful of games this season, but is now serving a 4-game suspension stemming from 3 arrests this year. And an update that I saw from the show, I got a headline on my phone saying that, where is it here? I must have accidentally opened it, but it said that Walton was accused of battery and for punching a pregnant woman several times. So, yeah, sounds like he's a good dude.
Yeah, great. It's a very simple equation. Don't punch women and people in general, but especially women, and you'll get paid millions of dollars. It's a crazy thing in the NFL lately. I know it's really hard to resist punching a person, but, like, you get millions of dollars if you don't. So, like, just don't. It's a pretty simple equation.
Yeah, one that he is evidently struggling with. And then one last thing to point out, the NFL is revealing the 100 greatest players and 10 greatest coaches in NFL history, just something that the NFL and the NFL Network is doing every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern through December 27th, right after Christmas. The NFL will announce the latest members of the all-time team during a 1-hour special hosted by Rich Eisen featuring Bill Belichick and Chris Collinsworth. They have announced the 24 running back finalists for the team, and 12 running backs will make it. So half of the current finalists will make it to the team. And, you can check out the list on NFL.com, but the 2 names that Steelers fans are going to pay attention to are Jerome Bettis and Franco Harris. Both those guys made the list. I have a feeling that one of them will make the all-time team, not 2.
Yeah, it should definitely be one of them. Like, they've been really great for them, but it's going to be interesting which one they actually end up choosing.
And they have guys from, 100 years. They have guys from all eras. So they have Adrian Peterson, who is still an active player. They've got, Barry Sanders, Franco Harris, Eric Dickerson, Jim Brown, just to name a few. They also go as far back as Steve Van Buren from the 1940s, Harold Red Grange from the 1920s and 30s. So they've got a good list of players here, and I'm hoping to see at least one player from, these eras, because I think it's fair to acknowledge guys from all of those eras. So I just wanted to point that out. And something to look forward to. And as we wrap up this game, we already talked a little bit about some of these things, but Mason Rudolph, I know we already touched on it, but what do you think about him so far? And going forward, what are you hoping to see from him?
So far, I still have the same thought. I mean, maybe I had been saying that he wasn't a guy that would lose you games. I thought last week or in this past game, he probably lost the game with the 4 interceptions. There was a chance for a comeback at the end, and he threw that late pick, which was an ender to the game. But, it's just, I don't know, one bad game doesn't define you. I still stick with the overall thing that he's just kind of a game manager, and he's normally not going to lose you games. He doesn't really have that it factor so far. To me, he hasn't shown that he has that. And I really would have wished after, like, a year of, like, redshirting where he got to learn the playbook, understand the offense stuff, that he would have came out better. Because normally I wouldn't be this judgmental through 6 games if this was his first year, but he had a full year to, like, sit down, understand, watch tape, not have to be thrown into the fire. And now he's here, and he's not. He doesn't look like he has that it factor to be a great quarterback. I think he's just going to be okay and mediocre for the rest of his career. He to me, right now, through a very short sample size, he to me appears to be like a journeyman. Like, I don't think he's gonna. I think he's gonna stick around in the NFL for a while, but I don't think he's ever going to be like a good quarterback.
I still haven't seen enough. I mean, I've still seen 6 games from him, and it's just, I really wish you could just throw Mason Rudolph in a vacuum and see what he'd do with Antonio Brown and, an offensive line and a running game. I can't underscore how terrible the running game has been. I mean, this is approaching a historically bad rushing attack for the Steelers. They're on pace to finish with just over 1,200 yards, and that's just unthinkable how awful that is. And, like I've said, like we've been saying, he didn't do much to help his teammates, but his teammates have done almost nothing to help him this year outside of the pass protection from the offensive line most of the time. I need to see the whole season in a vacuum, and I think this week against the Bengals, I think this is going to be a big game from him. I want to see how he bounces back from a bad performance, because like you say, you can't be defined by your one bad performance, just like you also can't be defined by one good performance. You need to see a whole sample size, and 6 games is quite frankly not enough, especially when you're talking about an offense that, again, has nothing to hang its hat on. I am disappointed because I feel like we were able to, I was a lot younger, but I felt like we knew pretty early on with Ben Roethlisberger that there was potential there, and right now I'm still not sure. I'm hoping that signature game comes soon, because if you don't get that signature game from Mason Rudolph, at least one where you can say, all right, I can see something there, then like if you don't get that by the end of this year, I'm not 100% done with him, but I'm concerned. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, you gotta at least have a game where there's potential for like greatness.
Exactly. We already talked a bit about the rushing attack, the short yardage offense. Where do you go from here? I'm not sure what you can do. I really don't think the running game is going to get any better this year. Not the way it is right now. I'm not sure what you can do differently. Other than maybe instead of packing it in and trying to run the ball the way they have this year, maybe just spread it out and try to run it out of spread formations, get these running backs into space, because they aren't generating any push on their own.
Yeah, I just think it's just too late for the rushing. It's not going to come. If it hasn't come now, we're at week 11, going into week 12. Like, we're not going to get it in the last 4 games of the regular season. It's just, this is what it is. This is the identity, even though it's a bad one. And it's not going to change. The short yardage, like, I wish it would change this year, but it's going to be something in the offseason that they need to scheme more plays that are going to be, better on short yardage situations, add more to the arsenal, add more to the playbook for those situations. Things that are going to get you the third down and short more often. I don't know. I feel like both these issues are something that just going to have to try and fix next year.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it's something. The only thing you can hope for with the running game is that you hope that Benny Snell can help a little bit, and you hope that if James Conner can come back and he's healthy, that'll provide a bit of a boost, but it's not going to go from 20 yards a game to 70 yards a game. You know what I mean? It's only going to be a slight bump.
Yeah, man, nothing huge.
And then on 3rd and 4th and short, I don't know. I know I just said spread it out, but maybe you just run more quarterback sneaks. Maybe you just throw an extra lineman in the backfield and just, you just try to push for a yard. I don't know. The rollout pass, that's not going to do it. We already know the inside shovel isn't working anymore. When in doubt, I guess if nothing creative is working that you have that's creative, if nothing is working along that lines, I guess just line it up and just push forward. Just if you get beat, you get beat. They've been getting beat all year anyways. What's the difference?
Man, more quarterback sneaks. That's what I want.
Yeah, but we'll see. I'm not hopeful that's going to happen. Already talked about the offensive identity. Speaking of coaches, so one thing I wanted to say, I know I mentioned it earlier in the show, I don't think Randy Fichtner is going to get fired, and I want to say that I actually have some hope for him going into next season. And let me explain. So I don't think it's much of a secret that Randy Fichtner was selected as the offensive coordinator because that's Ben's guy, right? And not that he wasn't necessarily, not qualified, but at the same time, we know that Ben Roethlisberger is sort of a pseudo-offensive coordinator, at least assistant in his own right. So Randy Fichtner, this is his first time calling plays the last 2 years since he was a coach at Memphis, so it's been a while. I think that this year has been a huge step for him, at least a huge learning experience for him, where we said beforehand it's going to be a challenge for him learning how to scheme plays better, create and call plays better without Antonio Brown. And now with a young backup quarterback, learning what plays to call and to not call. And I think that the struggles he has gone through this year will make him a better coordinator going into next year with Ben Roethlisberger coming back and going through year 2 with a less established options at your skill positions. I think this has the opportunity. I'm not saying it will. I am just hopeful that Fichtner will become a better coordinator through in and throughout next year because of all the trials and tribulations he's had to go through this year. Are you with me on that? Or am I wrong to be hopeful?
I don't think you're wrong to be hopeful, but I don't feel the same. I feel like you do learn through adversity, and this would be an adverse year for Randy Fichtner, but I'm not as confident in him changing it up. I feel like usually once you, I don't know, I'm not as confident, but I can be hopeful going forward. I don't blame you for being hopeful.
Speaking of other coaches, is Danny Smith on the hot seat? We've talked all season, for years really, about the lack of kickoff return game. There's been nothing to write home about with the punt return game. And the kick and punt coverage teams have been okay, but they haven't been as great as they need to be. And, the scheming in terms of getting punt blocks just haven't been as noticeable as they have been in years past. So it's not like he hasn't been perfect. He hasn't been terrible. But at the same time, the same issues that we've talked about with with Danny Smith continue to rear their ugly heads.
I think Danny Smith is on the hot seat. I mean, you have great years from your kicker and your punter, but I don't think that's enough. I feel like the kick and punt coverage teams and then the return games have been just abysmal, and it's just been that way. I mean, what I will give him credit for is the penalties on special teams have gone way down this year, it feels like, compared to like last year or something. But I just think that he is still on the hot seat, and I think he is going to get fired after this year.
Do we know how many years he has left on his contract?
I have no idea, no.
If he doesn't get fired, I could definitely see the contract expiring and them deciding to not bring him back,
Yeah, maybe that's the route they'll take instead.
You have any further thoughts on the defense right now? All right, then. Looking ahead for the Steelers' last 6 games, they played the Bengals in Cincinnati next week. Then they're hosting the Browns. They're at Arizona, playing the Cardinals. They host the Bills. And then they're on the road the last 2 weeks of the season at the New York Jets and then at the Baltimore Ravens. The Steelers at 5-5 right now. They're probably going to have to win 4 of their next 6 games to make the playoffs, which would leave them at 9-7. Can they do it?
It's possible. I mean, I look at the Cardinals and the Ravens game as the 2 games that you're probably losing. The Bills I'm not as scared as I was anymore when I first saw that game. Bengals, they need to win it. I mean, I'm sure that it's going to be closer than it should be, but it's definitely winnable. That second Browns game, I'm hoping the offensive line plays a little bit better even without Marquise Pouncey for that. Really, I'm just worried about those Cardinals and Ravens game. And I'm not even – you know what's great about that Ravens game? The Ravens might bench their own players. Since that's Week 17, it's going to be dependent on how the Patriots are doing. I'm really hoping that that either the Ravens have taken over and they can't lose it, or the Patriots are too far ahead now, and that there's no possible way the Ravens could get the first seed or fall past the second seed or something like that. So there's a chance that the Ravens have to – they don't have to, but there's a chance that they bench their best players for that game. So there's hope for that game as well, for that alone. And even if they don't, I mean, the Steelers almost beat the Ravens with their third-string quarterback in this game. Let's be real. If it wasn't for a Juju Smith-Schuster fumble, they probably would have. So there's hope for this. Even if you drop like a disappointing game, like let's say they lose to the Bengals this week, which would really, really suck, I wouldn't even rule it out yet. I think that there's possibility to win all the rest of the games. All the games are winnable here. Just there's certain games that look a little harder than the rest. What do you think?
That Ravens game, I think the only scenario where the Ravens won't play their starters is if they have the number 2 seed locked up, not the number 1 seed. The important thing to realize about if you have home field advantage, because let's be honest, the Steelers are playing for the 6 seed most likely, not the 5 seed. If the Steelers get the 6 seed and they manage to win on Wild Card Weekend and the Ravens are number 1 seed, you're going to Baltimore to play in the playoffs. And I don't know if you know anything about playing divisional opponents in the playoffs, But that's generally something you don't like to do. At least that's what they say. I don't know if John Harbaugh is someone that subscribes to that theory, but I think the general consensus is you try to avoid divisional matchups if you can, or at the very least, you like to eliminate your division opponent, right?
Yeah, for sure. You like to screw over your opponent.
So, I think if the Steelers' only shot is at the 6th seed and the Ravens are the number 2 seed, they're not going to be that concerned because they would only see the Steelers in the championship game, and they're not going to look that far ahead. Not that you'd be looking crazy far ahead anyways, but I feel like that's the only scenario where you could see them possibly resting their starters. But again, that's still a ways away. The Bills have not beaten a team with a winning record this year. I just wanted to put that out there.
And the Steelers have beaten 2.
Indeed, they have. And, obviously I like their chances against the Bengals. It's not going to be easy. I know even with the skill position players being possibly down, I think the game in 2 weeks against the Browns could be a blowout win for the Steelers. I think they might win that game by 20 points.
Been pissed off for the last time?
Yeah, I really think so. That game in Arizona, I don't really know. That team has played really well lately. I'm actually going to be really interested to watch Kyler Murray in that offense because they've outperformed my expectations this year. But the games that I think are games that you definitely should win are the Jets game and the Bengals game, and that means you have to go 2-2 the rest of the way. Those in the 4 other games besides that to have a good shot at making the playoffs. It's definitely doable. Obviously, will they is another question, and it all starts with the Bengals. So, with that in mind, any closing thoughts here?
Oh.
Alrighty then. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions about the show or you want to check us out, see our social media platforms or our website, visit strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. You can find our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and email all from our website. And feel free to write in with questions about the show or feedback. We'd be happy to hear about it. We always appreciate interaction with our listeners. And we'll be back later in the week to talk about Steelers and Bengals for the second time, this time from Cincinnati. And, thank you as always for listening. And Austin, thank you for joining me. So to all the listeners, thank you, and have a terrific week.
Have a good day.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.